Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tough to Treat. This is Susan Clinton, and welcome to this episode. We're going to talk about heel pain today and an unusual, or maybe not unusual, presentation on a 60-year-old female. Join us, listen in, give us your feedback on the clinical reasoning and some of the stuff we discuss on this podcast. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Clinton, and I'm here with my co-host, Erica Mello, and we are Tough to Treat. Hi, Erica. How's it going today?
I am good, Susan. How are you?
I'm good. Getting ready to start a busy travel schedule for myself this spring.
Yeah.
And but looking forward to having a chat with you today.
Absolutely. And before we start, I wanted to thank everybody for joining our Facebook group. So we're still, we usually give announcements at the end, but I want to, thank everybody. We have a Facebook group called Tough to Treat Podcast, and look forward to a lot of engagement. We have some really great clinicians in there.
Yep. So join us and ask some questions.
Yep.
Let's get everybody talking about stuff.
Exactly.
And speaking of questions, I have a patient that I wanted to discuss.
Cool.
Basically, 60-year-old female, Caucasian. She's somebody we talked about earlier on the podcast that was sitting sideways at her computer and having some neck and shoulder problems, which all resolved. And she ended up getting a virtual screen so she could a virtual backdrop on Zoom.
Yep.
You can do that so that she could change position, stand, move, and do her work. And didn't hear from her for a while, and then she came back and wanted to talk about her back and her leg. So this is kind of how she presented, that her back feels tight all the time, and her hip feels really tight on the right side. A fitness professional asked her to sit cross-legged on her bed and stretch forward to stretch her back out. So she does that every day. But she mainly just feels like she's just very stiff, and it hurts. So, and one of her biggest things she complained about was leaning over to, put her underwear on, to step into a slip, to step into pants, and to do things like that.
Yep.
And kind of an interesting presentation. It didn't come out in the beginning, but it did. I've got my notes right here.
Yeah.
It did come out later in the conversation as we were going through things. So I'll get to those interesting pieces in a second. The other things.
Go ahead. Does it bother you? Said to put her pants on. I mean, lifting the leg or just bending over?
Like just bending over and lifting the leg. She just said it was hard to do.
Okay.
And she also then started telling me about her heel pain. And she has heel pain on the left side.
Okay.
And she said it's weird because she said, I can make it worse by doing this. And she would stand and she would roll her foot to the side. So basically she would stand and supinate her left foot. And just pull up the, the inside and be standing on the lateral border of her foot. She goes, when I do that, I bring my pain on.
In her heel. Got it.
Yep. And I said, really, what happens if you go the other way? Then she said, nothing happened when she went the other way other than just the normal stuff.
Yeah.
Worse when she gets out of a chair. I said, what is it like in the morning? I don't know. I don't think it's that bad. So she couldn't really tell me when it would come on and when it wouldn't. It was kind of interesting. She goes, I would have to pay closer attention to it. So it wasn't fitting, kind of like, for all of you out there that are doing pattern recognition stuff, it's not really fitting, but what is kind of considered, just kind of the hallmark of what, that trash term like low back pain, plantar fasciitis. I don't even know why we still use that word anymore. It doesn't fit the normal heel pain kind of criteria that you think about. Worse when they stand up, better when they sit down, and
worse in the morning.
Right. It hurts on the inside of the heel, the inside, like underneath the plantar surface on the medial side. That's where it hurts.
Yep.
When she comes off of that and goes into supination, it's worse.
Okay.
So that's weird.
Yeah.
Because you'd think, wow, if she just like stepped on it, it would be worse.
Correct.
Like if she
Correct.
like went into, pronation, that should make
Yes.
it worse. But
Yes.
but that doesn't really change it that much. It's the going the other way.
And she
So
does that with walking. I'm obviously right. So that bothers her when she walks.
she doesn't really walk on the outsides of her feet. So she says she can walk it off, and when she gets going, she's okay.
Ah,
So
okay. Oh, that's
yeah,
not.
and that kind of fits the box. But it's weird that she'll stand there and shift off of that left foot onto the side of her foot and make her
Hmm.
pain worse. I was just
Okay.
kind of puzzled by that. So I just kind of blinked a few times and let her keep telling me her story.
Hmm.
And so I said, well, what do you want to work on first? So we asked her what else was going on in her life. She's got an impending marriage for her daughter coming up soon. She definitely is working more hours than she thought she was going to be working. It's brought up some conflict with her husband because it's happening through the evening hours and dinner.
Mm.
Um, just some other things that have been going on.
Any
Not
pet?
real sure about this or that. And then she said the following, because I started asking more deep probing questions,
Hmm.
like I do. And I wanted to know how her health has been and what's been going on with her over the last, I said, when did all this start? She said, well, the heel pain started, maybe about 4 months ago. And I said, what was going on then? I hadn't seen her in a while. And, so she was just telling me, that's when she was telling me about all that. She's busy, she's this and this and this and this. And she's 60.
Hmm.
So not that that's a bad thing, but it's just kind of we have to consider time of life.
Yep.
And, so I'm starting to think, okay, so my differentials are starting to come in. It's like, all right, what is this? Is this neural tension or is this a tendinosis?
Hmm. Yep.
And why, and this left side thing, is this the same as her back? Is this a dural thing? What's happening here?
Right. Or is she
You know?
offloading that right hip onto that left side and that type of thing?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah. So
what
this
is
is
this
kind
for?
of like, now it's kind of all comminuted into this like whole thing,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, where do we start picking and choosing and what can we change right away? And so, I just looked at her, we looked at her bendovers were great, didn't bother her a bit.
Hmm.
Right-sided side bending and extension brought on her back issues.
Okay.
Fairly straightforward.
Yep.
Looked at her hip, flexion abduction like a Faber was
Hmm.
the hardest thing she did.
Hmm.
Our flexion with external rotation.
Yep.
Everything else was fine around the hip area.
Hmm.
All neuroscan, everything was all okay as far as like reflexes, dermatomes, myotomes, all of that was like good.
Hmm.
She could walk on her toes. It didn't seem to bother her heel, although when we kept going, it did a little bit.
Hmm.
She could walk on her heels and no problem, So look, I was looking more at myotomes, not really trying to bring her pain on, but in
Yep.
her foot. But if it happened, so be it. Then I would have more information.
Yep.
But anyway, I just wanted to be sure everything was kind of like okay there. And we did some mobilization to the lumbosacral area, L4, L5, where she wasn't moving so hot. And just, put a little input into the area, got things moving, got her standing back up, extension was fine, and the hip was moving much, much, much better. So that was like, yay! I love it when
Yes.
you come in and it's clear. So her
Exactly.
homework was to go home, lay on her left side, and twist herself up so that she could actually get to that area where she felt that stiffness and just
Hmm.
kind of do some rotations and relieve
Rotations.
that. Yeah, so she had something specific she could do,
Hmm.
and we talked a little bit more, and I said, okay, let's now that we kind of got that through, she really wanted to talk more. So I said, well, let's look at a few more things here. um, I said, what else do you think is really going on? Like what's really worrying you here? And she said the fact that I'm just not moving as much as I used to because of this job at the computer. So
Mm.
to just remind people, she works with students on a computer in a school that they work through, and so she has meetings all the time on her computer. That's how she works. She goes, I'm just not moving, and she had just gotten back from a trip to Florida where she went on some long walks and depended. She tried to be on intermediate sand, not the softest, not the hardest. The walking and everything felt wonderful. The sun was great, life was good. And then she got back and, the gray skies of Pittsburgh in the middle of the winter.
Yeah.
Anyway, but she did, she was telling me about, the little bit of the conflict that's coming up at home with, her job has morphed into something more than she thought it was going to morph into. She just was kind of, unloading a little bit. And I said, well, let's talk a little bit about your health. What else has been going on? Well, she's been sick twice. And she started talking about some other things. She goes, and the weirdest thing was I had this rash on my left leg. I
Left
said,
leg.
where on your left leg? She
Yeah.
was showing me on the inside of her thigh.
Mm.
She said, I went to the dermatologist. They told me it was some sort of underlying skin infection that, they treated. It said it works really well with the topicals. And so, and she had it. It took a while, but it finally started to ease up. But what happened? I said, well, what about the rash? Like, she said, well, it created a huge kind of like hypersensitivity on the inside of her thigh,
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
left side. Everybody
Yeah.
hear that?
Yeah, I know.
And I said, so tell me what else has been going on. Have you had any other kinds of things? So I just started asking like a laundry list of questions.
Yes, yes.
And she's had the shingles twice. She's had it 4 years ago. She had it again this
Oh
year.
my God.
Left side of her neck.
Wow.
Same
That's
presentation,
yeah.
suboccipital,
Yeah.
very light,
Yeah.
not really like anything that needed the meds, not a lot of pain. People were kind of puzzled, and they all just kind of chalked it up to a very light case of the shingles.
Got it.
So now I'm beginning to say again, okay, is it neural tension? Is it metabolic now?
Is it
Or
right?
is it tendinosis? And,
Mm.
the interesting thing is you can get tendon issue from the shingles virus.
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
it's specific to the Achilles.
Interesting.
Yeah. So here we go with this kind of presentation. So I kind of started thinking, all right, we need to look at this just a little bit differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need to think about this much more metabolically than probably. I mean, then probably like just straight at the hill, like let's lift the hill, let's do this, let's, do all the other stuff, pull the toes back, stretch. So what I sent her home with was to just notice. I wanted her to notice more, like be more mindful so that you can really tell me when you come back what's really happening here. Does it
Mm-hmm.
really have a mechanical aspect to it or not?
Mm.
When else do you feel it? I know you're noticing it when you get up out of a chair.
Right.
But when else? Like, I want to really know kind of, she's just so busy, she's not paying attention until this
Yeah.
was, but anyway, it was like she said, well, it's interesting because when I was wearing pants, when I had the rash, I couldn't tolerate them. They were rubbing and it was so
Yeah.
intolerable. So
Wow.
anyway, so I'm beginning to think that there's something going on through the neurological system for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
And it's set up a sensitive nervous system somewhere.
Yep.
With the back, that the back could be a fleeting issue that comes and goes, it may not have anything to do with this.
Yep.
But to me, it sounds like two completely separate issues, but you can't really
Right.
separate things out. So anyway, long story short, I did a slump test.
Yep.
Nothing. I did a
Nothing.
full blown, like really, reverse straight leg
Leg
raise.
raise.
Yeah, but I did her with her sitting and leaning all the way forward as far as she could go.
Yep.
Didn't bring anything on. And the only thing that I did otherwise that may or may not have caused her to have a little bit of an issue was when I actually brought her into adduction, and then I supinated her foot a little bit. So when I brought her left leg all the way over across midline and
Mm-hmm.
supinated her foot a little bit, then she said, maybe I may, so I think she was just like looking for anything at that point.
Right.
Hard to tell.
Yep.
So, so we
So
just decided we were going to watch and see on this one and see what happens. So I'm looking for any questions, input you have on this, because I find it fascinating.
it is interesting. So with the straight leg raise, you did a full blown straight leg raise too, dorsiflexion, inversion, eversion, and then when you adducted and supinator, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you do? Sometimes I do this. Did you do like an extension slump where no, it's I just call it extension slump, but you're not slumping. You're sitting up really straight, and then you're straightening your legs out at all, and then you're going side to side with the foot.
I did not do that.
Sometimes I do that just to see because I've had patients who, oh God bless, I've had patients who sometimes get symptoms that way, but she had nothing in the full blown slump though, right?
Nothing in the
No.
full-blown slump. And I
Okay.
did do the slump with both legs out. I just didn't do it in extension.
Oh, I like that. That's good.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so when she goes up, so when she goes from sit to stand, it's almost like she's lengthening,
Right.
like something's lengthening in her body, right? And it
Hmm.
could be that it's just from immobility, but she doesn't have a problem in the morning. So that sort of, in my mind, almost rules that out. But
Hmm.
uh, the low back issue, um, you said it resolved the hip, right? You just mobilized L4-5 into
Hmm.
extension, side
Hmm.
bending. Okay, so that's a
Hmm.
capsular issue. So I would agree. I think they could be, not 100% related,
Well,
Um,
the only thing that makes me feel like that there may be some more related stuff to it is the fact that she says that she has that, always that feeling of tightness um,
yeah,
across her back, and stretching
yeah,
doesn't make it any better. So that always kind of, we've talked about that a number of times,
yep,
and not, so I don't want to rule, I don't want to rule the whole system out. Like the back could have an issue, and maybe one of the drivers is that either the dura or the
right,
sensitive nervous system in there, and the movement around it maybe
yep,
what's setting up her just joint loading and some issues
yeah,
of tension and pain in her lumbar spine as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
So
Did you palpate the foot? Like, was she point tender on the foot?
she was a bit like, if you
Yep,
got into and palpated, it's real specific to the medial aspect of where the Achilles inserts
yep,
into the calcaneus, and
yep.
just right under that medial part of the calcaneus.
Got it.
And so, and we talked about a lot of different things, and I said, you can get this imaged if you want, and you may have a heel spur, you may not. I said I probably have heel spurs on both sides. It's just, that's kind of a normal thing of aging. Not everybody has pain with it, though. I said I
Yeah.
feel like that this is
Yes.
tracking a little bit differently, and that's when we talked about the shingles. And I said it's interesting that you were telling me about shingles and about the rash and about some of this stuff, because that can actually set up a sensitivity in the system that sometimes, and nobody seems to know why metabolically, but the Achilles is such a funny
Yep.
tendon. It doesn't behave like other tendons. It
No,
just
it doesn't.
doesn't.
I've had
It rips for no reason. It gets tendinoses. It gets inflammatory stuff. It All kinds of weird things happen around the Achilles tendon that just don't happen everywhere else.
Yeah, and I've
And,
had heel pain myself, as have you, right? So,
hmm.
and I had it at the medial calcaneal tubercle, and that's really where it was. So I was swollen, and I would
Hmm.
walk on my toes home. That's
Hmm.
how bad it was for me, and it did not get better with movement. I was just the opposite. Mine
Right.
was like worse.
Yeah.
And so that's the only sort of monkey in the room for me. I mean, if she only gets it with sit to stand,
Hmm.
there's got to be something in that nervous system that's not lengthening
Yeah.
appropriately. That's what
Yeah.
I think.
So I need to go back and take a real good look at sit to stand and see what's happening. There's something maybe through, it's just interesting to say. I did, check up her leg and track up her leg to see if I could find any sensitivities or tenderness.
Mhm.
She was still a little bit kind of iffy around that left, almost want to call it like obturator field on the left inner thigh.
Mhm.
Or it could have been the femoral area. It's hard to say. It could have been all cutaneous, which is tracked back into the long tracking system.
Yep.
And now, because that's not moving well and maybe pulling too much on the medial plantar nerve or the tibial nerve as it comes through. And I thought it was interesting you guys were talking in the Facebook group about
Mhm. Yeah.
tibial neural tension.
Yes.
And it was
Yes.
like, I
Yes.
wonder if that's what's going on here. So I
Yes.
was thinking about, and I was thinking about the lateral border of the foot and, kind of pulling into supination. It's like, maybe that's more like an entrapment.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
she pinches it up and it doesn't feel good,
Right.
you
Right.
know, and
Right. You're
that's why she's
shortening.
able to kind of, yeah. And so if she's sitting, I'm wondering now, this is great, thank you, because I'm going to be able to check all this. I'm wondering if when she's sitting, she kind of sits and lets her foot fly, flop over to the side.
Yes.
And so that's setting that up. It's getting short, short, short. And then all of a sudden she goes to stand up and it's like, oh,
Right.
and then
Right.
if you think about it too, if it's happening up in the thigh area, then sitting is going to be very, very different from laying down.
Right. And you almost when she's standing, you go from sit to stand, you could always try and give her some cues, like try to see if she can, flatten her. Like I always say, imagine your foot's rooted to the ground, to see if she can naturally fan the midfoot, to
Mhm.
see if it uh, helps. That's something I would try. I would also try. I mean, I would probably try and taper, just because that's what I do. I mean, but
Mhm.
just to try to tape her, not even her rear foot, maybe her rear foot into a little bit of distraction. That's a tape I talk about a lot. And I should probably put that description in the Facebook group now that we have a place to put something. Or even tape her midfoot into like into eversion or more
Mhm.
pronation, to see
Right.
if that helps her
Mhm.
stand. Uh, excuse me, but I think that because you almost want to try, and I'm just thinking about it now, get her in a sitting position, an extension, have her flex that left leg out straighten the left knee out, flex the foot, and almost like do some extension seated slumps, even though she wasn't positive on a slump
Mhm.
test, but it
Yeah.
almost like it mimics, have her go into real extension like she's standing, and see
Mhm.
if that helps. I would also try getting her on a half foam roller,
Mhm.
and try her squatting, go from sit to, like, from a squat to stand, see if that bothers her.
Yeah, she squats pretty well.
She does.
So yeah, she, pretty well. Little stiff in the hip because when we did the squatting, it was before we worked on, before we got her back moving.
Mhm.
And she was able to, move her hip easier. So squatting and some of that stuff was a bit easier. But that's a good point, to kind of just see what happens when we put her up and bring her down. And I like the idea of doing the other stuff anyway, because she can do that before sit to stand. If nothing else, it's going to mobilize the nervous system, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
And if it helps, it'll be worth trying to see, because this is kind of elusive, and it may take doing a number of retests to figure out what's going to be the best, reset exercises for her to do
Mhm,
to kind of
mhm.
settle this down when it gets acted up. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
interested. I'm going to send her an email as soon as we get off, and have her, I'm going to ask her a few questions about, notice where your feet are when you're sitting,
yeah.
and your
Did
legs and stuff like that. I just want to get an idea of what's, kind of what's happening here.
does she do better? Are shoes, like heels, no heels? Does that make a difference for her at all?
It was interesting. She said that, she goes, I don't wear the best cushion shoes. Um, that's what brought up the walking on the beach and some of the other stuff and everything. And I said, well, do you think it matters? And she goes, no.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know we're looking at, we're trying to brainstorming and throwing all things on the table here. But I
Yeah.
said, things that don't matter, let's move over here and put them in the parking lot, and
Right.
we can look at them later if we need to. But for right now,
Yeah.
let's kind of look at the pieces that we think are important.
What was the time frame from her second shingles episode and the uh, onset of the heel? Was it
So
close,
the
or?
the, the rash came first. So what,
Oh,
shingles came first, then the
oh
rash
yeah. Okay.
on the leg, and then the sensitivity in the heel, the pain in the heel. So it kind of went in that direction, which made me really feel like there's something metabolically happening. So I'm also going to refer her to a functional medicine doctor. She hasn't in a long time had a full thyroid panel done. She probably needs
Yeah.
to have some inflammatory markers done. This particular doc will look at, viruses that are kind of underlying in the system.
Yes.
Sometimes there's viruses that we have them and they express themselves, and then they hang out kind of dormantly running around in the system behind us.
Is sh
So, just to get a thorough look. Plus, she hasn't had a hormone panel,
I was
and she's
just gonna
60.
ask that.
It's time to do that. Yeah.
I was just gonna ask that question, because I've done some research on
Uh-huh.
perimenopause, obviously menopause at this point,
Mhm.
and the onset of tendinosis in
Mhm.
females.
Mhm.
And there's a study by Ganderton, out of Australia, where she's putting women on hormone, mostly
Mhm.
cream, transdermal creams, who have documented evidence of tendinosis, and
Yeah.
putting them through a couple groups: hormone replacement plus exercise, and exercise only. So I find that fascinating. I
Yeah.
really do.
It is. The only thing we need to be careful of is for people who have, they need to watch their blood pressure,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
progesterone in females in menopause can raise blood
Blood
pressure.
pressure.
Yeah, so
Yes.
you want to be careful about that. But other
Yeah,
than that, yeah, no, that's why I wanted her to have it. It was like, let's
yeah.
get let's get a workup done from, a really good kind of point of view. And all my public health listeners out there, I know what you're thinking, and no, she didn't have any urgency. She doesn't have any urinary problems. I
Yep.
did ask about that because, I'm thinking tibial nerve and,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and how it kind of all connects. And, you know, just absolutely no symptoms of urgency, no leaking. This is a very healthy female
Yeah. Yeah.
that has just kind of run into some metabolic issues, I think, and other than the back stiffness that probably can come and go. I mean, the back issue that was preventing her from going into extension. Um, you know, uh, I think the stiffness and some of the other stuff is just metabolic stuff that's presenting itself. Certainly, movement is going to help that, no question whatsoever.
Yes.
But I don't. We want to see what we can kind of figure out and help her with this sensitive heel piece too, because that can
Painful.
just get worse, and
I know.
I don't want that to get worse. I want to give her a hand. So yeah, I'm definitely doing the workup for the hormone stuff and viruses and
Yeah.
thyroid panels and inflammatory markers. Again,
Yeah.
she's got a lot going on too.
Yep.
She hasn't been sleeping well. That's not helping.
No.
So we talked a bit about, we're going to start working on a little bit of sleep hygiene. I kind of did a little health coaching with her and talked about her job, and she likes it because it makes her happy working with the students. And I said, what do you hate about your job? And do you have, what kind of a position do you have? Is this something that, you could work less hours and still be fed the joy of your work without losing the joy of your household, so
Mm-hmm. Yep.
just kind of
Yep.
some things for her to think about a little bit and see what she can do with her plate of activities. And I said, it's just going to be a busy time too right now, so there's things you can't do anything about, but there are things you can. So what are the things you can do something about? Figure those
Yep.
out
Yep.
and start working on those, because you're not going to change the fact that your daughter's getting married and it's a joyous time, but there's a lot of stuff that's going on
Yeah. Yeah.
with that. In Pittsburgh, it's like the cookie train has started. I mean, it's kind of an Italian thing in Pittsburgh, but the cookie table, the bigger it is, the better, and
Yeah.
so there's the recruitment of everybody to make cookies, and people
Oh
start
wow.
baking cookies and put them in freezers for like months ahead of time so that they have this like ginormous table. I mean,
Oh, I didn't know that.
oh yeah, there's a lot that goes on. So
Oh wow.
I didn't know it either when I first moved up here. It's like a cookie table. What is that?
What's a cookie
So,
table?
but I mean, there's just a lot going on in her life, and I think we need to honor that, as well as,
Yeah.
the physical presentation too, because
Yeah.
it's going to be a multimodal, I think, type of approach to
Yeah.
getting this better, and to figure out, how we can, like, first of all, calm the system down, get it moving better, right? Because like you
Mm-hmm.
say all the time, Erica, nerves are bloodsuckers.
Yep.
So let's get that nervous system moving. Let's get the vascular system pumped up. She hasn't done anything to raise her heart rate in a while. And that was one of the other things I was going to do, is like, how can I get her moving a little bit,
Yep.
get that heart rate up, because she 60. We got to get going here.
It also could be that when the way how she's sitting, in some
Mhm.
way puts tension on the nerve,
Mhm.
on
Yeah.
the more centrally. But then when she stands, just something is not elongating. I would put if I had to, bet money, I would put it on something within the
Mhm.
nervous system, like peripherally, or
Yeah.
you know, just
Yeah. Something's
nothing's
not.
or dural or something like that, because
Yeah.
something's not moving
Yep,
appropriately.
and it's just hanging up. And again, whether it had a metabolic cause or not, it still needs to move. And
Yeah. Yeah.
again, I think there's a piece about getting the heart rate up a little bit, because that increases that vascular system, and
Yeah.
that's important for really delivering good nutrients to the nerves. And trying to figure. So I'm gonna need to talk with her a little bit and figure out how she can comfortably, without bringing on her symptoms, start getting her heart rate up a little bit every day, or at least 3 or 4 times a week, so she can put that in there. We'll have to kind of figure that out as well. But those are kinds
Yeah.
of like steps that I have, that are kind of in the outline of the other things we need to address. And it's going to take a little time to get her in to see the functional medicine doctor and get the
Yep.
the lab test done. But she takes people pretty quickly, so we can get her in and get that ball rolling for her, which she's just going to need over time anyway. So it's good to just know that now while everything's happening, rather than hoping
Yep.
that everything gets better. So,
Yeah.
but no,
And if
this
she
was
can just
great.
change her. No,
Hmm.
yeah, and if she can just change her strategy when she's going from sit to stand, the imagery, that'll at least
Hmm.
give her some short term. Maybe she can
Yeah,
focus on
yeah,
that, you
absolutely.
know.
That's why I said we have to
Yeah,
get on the movement piece here and see what
yeah,
we can get going and get the system, moving a lot
yeah.
better.
Yeah, I know,
Uh,
and it's I've had, as I said, I've had heel pain. It is not fun. It is very bad. I was it was it's shy of anything inherent in the biomechanically in the foot. And I always find patients like in the intake, I'm like, and I ask them if they have orthotics, and they're like, yeah, I was giving them for heel pain years ago, and I'm like, oh, did they help? They're like, yeah, and I'm like, because sometimes they don't. I'm
right.
not a big believer in orthotics unless the foot is a driver, but I'm like, see, I always ask patients, why does it make you feel better? And I almost think that it's offloading something in their system.
Yeah.
It's changing something in their
Mhm.
system,
Yeah, it's an
not
input.
necessarily an arch support, quote
Right. Yeah,
unquote.
my arch was falling in, so it just needed to be shored up. No,
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's like tape. It's an input.
Yeah,
It's like putting your
exactly.
hands on somebody and guiding
Yep,
them this way or that way. It's an input to the system, and does the system change
yep.
because of that? It's asking them to squat wider rather than more narrow. It's asking them to bend over, but can you keep your head in midline? Those are
Hmm.
all inputs into the system, and I totally agree. Which is why when we talked about shoes a little bit, I said, well, when you wear those little ballet slippers and walk all over the place, does it bother you? No, not really. It's like, then maybe
Oh,
it's
wow.
I don't think the shoe's the issue.
No, no, for
And I
sure.
don't think the foot's the issue.
I agree.
I think it's coming, especially when you start hearing the rest of the story. It's like, start tracking this, up the system
Hmm.
here
Yes, I
and start
agree.
finding out some more things. Thank you. This was very helpful.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Greatly
Awesome.
appreciated. And
Oh,
yeah, so I will keep you guys posted. Perhaps I'll take it over to the Facebook group and
yes.
give an update next week once I kind of get a little bit more uh, information from her as she comes back to talk about what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think that maybe
Yeah.
because I also, the patient that we talked about last, my patient who had the last podcast that I did, this
Hmm.
man, and I actually saw him again. So we can sort of post updates in the group that way. That may be
Yeah.
a
I
great
think
way
that'd
of
be a
doing
great
it.
way to do it.
Yeah,
So after what is this podcast 65?
yeah,
When
yeah,
that comes out, then I'll post some updates after
yeah.
people have a chance to listen
To listen,
and think
exactly.
about it. And yeah, and we'll go from there. So
Cool. Thank
awesome.
you. All
All right.
right.
Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for
Yeah.
listening. And if you haven't had a chance to go into iTunes and review us, we would greatly appreciate it. Your review means the world to us. And join us in our Facebook group and give us a shout out and ask questions and engage with each other.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sounds
Okay.
good.